Hello everyone. Let me start off by sending apologies from Sam. He's actually been called back to site today, so he's teaching his A-level group, so he's not going to be joining us today. So I'm afraid you're stuck with me and Jim from Shooters Hill. So we looked at action research, in particular looking at academic improvement mentoring. So we abbreviated this to the AIM project. And it involved 4 sites with this action research. So we are from, like we said before, from South East London. The 4 sites were our Christ the King Emmanuel site, which is in Lewisham in London, our Christ the King sixth form site, our St Mary's site, which is in Sidcup, which kind of counts as London, but maybe a little bit more Kent way. St Charles sixth form college, which is based in North Kensington, and Shooters Hill College, which our partner Jim is head of maths there in Greenwich. So we're all roughly really located quite near each other. So actually collaborating was actually quite easier, I guess, than maybe some other centres had where they were 20, 30 miles apart from each other. So collaborating was pretty nice. The way our action research came about is we first, during our network meetings, started to discuss, like others, that motivation and engagement was probably the area that we wanted to look into, because we knew that this was greatly influential for our learners. And we have a high percentage of students that are from a disadvantaged background and who also live in really socially deprived families and areas as well. And one of our primary observations were that these students in particular had little support from their families or maybe even their social groups for their maths, and the only support that they were getting was from their teacher. So it became apparent to us that through our centres and through our network partners that because of this shortage in support that our students were experiencing, we really wanted to fill that gap. And offer them extra support as well, and not just by their maths teachers. So we all spoke about what we could do, and we thought about using perhaps peers as mentors within the classroom setting. And then we kind of looked at other maths courses, so not just our GCSE Resit course, and we observed at Christ the King that actually in our A-level lessons, students were really good at kind of supporting each other inside the classroom and outside the classroom. And that wasn't really happening with our GCSE Resit course. There was a lot of support happening in class, but as soon as they left that class, that was it. There was no collaboration between each other or support being offered. So then we looked at, actually, instead of just using peers within the same GCSE course, perhaps we could use the A-level students as the mentor within the GCSE class. And that's exactly what we did. So once we decided this is what we wanted to focus on, we came up with our main question, which was, how does the use of academic improvement mentors impact the learning experience and mindset of Resit GCSE maths students? And it was really about looking at the non-academic side of support. So the peer acting as a mentor, offering support, guidance, tips, etc. It wasn't about just improving their academic attainment at all. And from those, we came up with our sub-questions. So how do students respond to being mentored in the classroom? So looking at the collaboration between mentor and peer. Are students more engaged in learning maths? So the impact of the mentoring. And has being mentored changed the extent to which they value maths? So that was almost looking at the mindset of our GCSE Maths Research students once the intervention had been delivered. We then kind of broke our sub-questions into even more mini sub-questions, because those questions, although there were sub-questions to the main question, we found that those sub-questions still needed a little bit more breaking down. So we came up with the little sub-questions. It was almost step-by-step for us, which ways were we going to actually investigate these sub-questions. So we wanted to look at the relationship between the mentor and the mentee. We knew that that was really important. We wanted to look at whether the mentee was actually using the mentor as a way of asking questions in the class, and what were they using the mentor for in the classroom, and in which way was the mentee actually being supported in the classroom. So that we felt would answer our first sub-question. And for our second question, we knew that for students to be more engaged in learning maths, we knew that it was really important to look at perhaps if they took ownership of the task and if that task was actually being completed, and also looking at the confidence change in those in our mentees as well. So that gave us a sort of a foundation to our research. I'm going to hand over to Jim, who's going to talk to you a little bit about our literature review and also our methodology for our action research project.
Yeah, so obviously in order to be able to do this, we need to get some background information. So we did quite a lot of research, as you do at this point, to get some feedback on what people had done before and some of the literature review. So one of the questions that we had to ask is, well, you know, what is this peer teaching about? So came across a few papers, and we had the definition, for example, from Kukowski. The peer tutoring is an approach which one child instructs another child in material in which the first is an expert and the second is a novice. Similarly, we had the peer tutoring as a form of cooperative learning that teaches students to work together in a positive manner and coach one another as they develop specific skills. And the peer tutoring is building a student support network from those three studies. So what we then did is we needed to start to think about, with this peer tutoring, what it is that we would want from our students. So obviously all this research is available, but let me talk you through specifically the methodology that we used. You can read some of our references, obviously, at the end of this paper. But for the methodology, we needed to decide exactly what it is that we needed to develop in these peers. So we identified a few key characteristics that we wanted in our mentors. We needed them to have, obviously, a strong subject knowledge up to grade 5 GCSE maths, because they'd be tutoring these resit students in foundation paper. We wanted peers from the same college. Obviously, that's a logistic thing and a safeguarding thing, and also potentially they might have the opportunity to at least acknowledge each other as they walk around the college. Some experience with peer-to-peer tutoring would be a bonus, and they need to be engaged and committed to the research project and not just, you know, do one and have a go and see what it's like and then drop out. So we started to obviously look at some of the people that might be interested in this and got them to fill in questionnaires and then made some decision on who we were going to employ. We then needed to obviously have some consistency in our delivery because, as Jimai said, we have 4 different sites and we wanted to make sure that we're all doing the same kind of thing. So we decided that each mentor would be allocated 2 sessions a week in the same GCSE class, so they get fairly familiar with the students that they're engaging with fairly quickly. We needed to reward them, and obviously that was a nice thing to be able to do. So we made sure that they had Amazon vouchers for their efforts, partly to reward them and to motivate them and engage them, but also by paying them, in effect, it means hopefully that they realise that it's a more professional engagement and they behave accordingly. Also, we decided that there's no more than 5 learners in a class in order to get the maximum benefit, and also to try and keep the results fairly consistent. So they work with maximum of 5, generally less than that. And of course, we took registers to make sure that we had all the right information about who they were dealing with, and also that they were turning up. Okay, so do you mind going to do the next slide for me? Thank you. Okay, so here we've got a bit of a timeline of what we originally planned. So we had the initial setup. So obviously that involves us deciding what it is that we wanted to research, our vision. We needed then, as we just mentioned, to look at the skills that we required from the mentors. What incentives? Obviously, you know, UCAS is a bit of incentive. There's a financial incentive. What resources we needed to put in place, if any, and the action plan. So, and then we would also need to organise some visits between the different sites so we could just to like quality assure what everybody's doing, and also get a feeling for how it's working across the other sites. Okay, so in the mentor selection, so that was in November, we targeted first year A-level students, and all teachers on different sites had a responsibility for reviewing the applications and deciding who was appropriate. As a result of this recruitment, we then had 27 mentors, 5 where I work at Shooters Hill, 8 at Sam's Place, St Charles Sixth Form College, and 14 at the 2 sites that Christ the King were doing this project with. We then made sure that all these mentors attended a half-day training session, and there was a nice little training pack. You can see some little images of that at the bottom of the slide. So all these students had a little training pack that we worked through on the day, and also gave them as a reference. So we did things like how you look at different learning styles, what is professional conduct, also things like doing a bit of role play to make sure they had an understanding of how to interact with the students. And this took place on an afternoon where they're all normally engaged in enrichment anyway, so there was no conflict with their classes. And obviously we were selling it to them by pointing out that they could get some reward financially, and that it would be a useful thing to put on future CVs and applications. Each mentor was then assigned to a GCSE class at least, and they would do their 2 sessions a week, and this would then be observed. So what was then supposed to happen is that we would get some data. Now, we didn't get all the data that we wanted because of various events that happened in the world, but we did get quite a lot of this data. And one of the things that we were looking at is making sure that we had the pre and post surveys of the mentees and the mentors. So looking at the kind of things that they had experienced previously, what issues they had, their feelings about maths, etc., etc. So we would have some information starting the process. We then went through some lesson observations. Again, this was not as intensive or as much as we would like because of lockdown. We didn't get all the information, but what we did was we observed lessons and punctuated points in the lesson. We would then just observe what was happening between the mentee and the mentor, and then just have a little tick sheet where we could tick off whether or not the mentor was explaining something or modeling something, whether the mentee was asking questions. We had a little tick sheet, and we did this every 10 minutes in the lesson to just get some feedback on how they were actually interacting. And then again, finally, towards the end, we were getting some mentee interviews, so we get some feedback of how they actually felt, and a teacher survey. Now, of course, obviously not all of this happened exactly as we liked, and in an ideal world we'd have a lot more data to analyze, but we did have some data, and we felt that we could make some comments and conclusions from data, which Tumai will now go through our results. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. So I'm just going to talk to you about some of the results that we came across. So I'm going to go through each sub question quite methodically. So the first sub question, which was looking at obviously the response to being mentored in the classroom. Before the mentoring actually began and we did the pre-surveys, a lot of the mentors and the mentees said that, well, particularly the mentees, they said that their biggest importance to them about resitting GCSE Maths was getting a grade 4. And that was quite apparent, and nationally it's probably the same picture everywhere, that getting grade 4 was the most important to them. It wasn't about understanding maths, and it wasn't about using maths for the future, it was just getting that grade 4. Similarly, when we asked the same question to the mentor about what impacts they thought that they would have on the mentee, they also said for them to pass was the most important and to achieve the highest grade possible. So before the intervention even started, both mentor and mentee were commenting about it was the fact of passing this exam was most important. So that was quite surprising to us, especially coming from the mentor as well. And then when we interviewed the mentees further, a lot of the learners continuously used the term one-to-one when questioned about how they thought mentoring would help them with their GCSE Maths. So these are some of the comments that the mentees made. To have one-to-one to do maths and being with a student who understands you, I could get one-to-one teaching with a student nearer my age, which might improve my learning. Have a deeper understanding and asking questions one-to-one I wouldn't ask to the class. So this one-to-one element just kept reoccurring even before the intervention came up. So that was quite interesting to us, that they really wanted to have this one-to-one in class, and maybe they weren't getting that already from their teachers. This would suggest that obviously learners had an awareness and a desire for the one-to-one support from someone their own age. The fact that the mentors were peers rather than a teacher or an assistant teacher seemed to be quite important to them. So when we actually delivered the intervention and the mentors started to go into the classroom, through the mentee interviews again, so this was post-intervention, a theme that they kept on referring to was the fact that their age was closer to theirs and that this was important. So this is another comment that one of the mentees made. A few of them actually made very similar comments. They said that the fact that his age is close makes it better because I feel like he knows the feeling better when I don't understand, rather than a teacher. One learner went as far as to say that the mentor was one of me, unlike a teacher. This learner also referred to their mentor using a nickname, so they weren't even calling their mentor by their first name. And when I asked them whether they were friends before, he told me no, they weren't friends, and he called him JK rather than his first name, which almost felt like they were forming almost like an informal bond between them, and the mentor did actually become like a friend to them and a support in class. So that was really nice to hear. A lot of learners, 5 in total that we interviewed, expressed that they felt like they were relieved when they come into class, and that they were more relaxed when the mentor was there. And because we were using A-level mentors, there were some occasions when those A-level mentors couldn't make it into class. So one student actually said that when they weren't there, I was okay, but I feel more relaxed when they are there. That was quite encouraging to hear as well. The working relationship between the mentor and the mentee. So the lesson observations that we did 16-minute lesson observations, and like Jim said, we didn't get to do all of them, but we did do enough to show us some preliminary results. It revealed that when the mentor is active in the classroom, they are most frequently either explaining or modelling a question, and vice versa, the mentors normally always producing the work or actually just listening to the mentor. So that was a good working relationship there. On the other hand, verbal encouragement by the mentor scored second lowest in the same lesson observations. So it seemed as though maybe the mentor didn't have enough confidence, or perhaps didn't know how to verbally encourage mentees. So that's maybe something that we can work on, taking the action research project forward. Learners really enjoyed the fact that the mentor used a different language and different methods to the teachers, and they could relate more to the mentor. There was informal language being used between the mentor and the mentee, and they felt like they could be more free and more open with someone their own age. The mentees asking relevant questions scored second lowest in the lesson observations. This seemed coherent with the responses that the mentees made during interviews as well, where mentees seemed to only ask questions when they were really, really stuck during a lesson, and almost waited until this point to do so. So one student commented that, saying, I wait till I really feel like I don't know what to do when it comes to a question, and I wait a few minutes just in case the knowledge hits me, and if it doesn't, I call my mentor over asking if I'm doing the right steps. So they'd only ask mentors for support when they're really, really stuck. Otherwise, it seemed as though they just wanted to do things independently. So moving on to my next sub-question, which was engagement. Encouragingly, mentees expressed how they used to hate coming to maths, and now the lessons are more fun, one commented. Having built a positive relationship between the mentor and the mentee, it seemed as though the mentee enjoyed the lesson more, and stated that they just felt more relaxed and more relieved. During a lesson observation, students were listening to the mentors about 29% of the time and asking the mentors questions about 15% of the time, but the most amount of time, 53%, was producing written work. The mentee seemed to take ownership of their set tasks, but like I said, the data is really limited here. We didn't get to fully complete that data to give enough feedback for that. Mentees did feel like they could complete tasks with the support of the mentee, and that did change their confidence levels slightly. But again, we felt like maybe a post survey, and if we got the chance to do our post survey, that would maybe bring some more insight into learner confidence. Mentees valued, obviously, like I said before, grade 4 in maths equally before and after being mentored, but the lessons were more enjoyable with mentoring. Mentors reported that mentees work harder and complete more tasks, but they do not like maths any more than they did being mentored. So it doesn't seem to really affect the way in which they value maths, but they did feel like they were more supported. Now I'm getting the thriller sign from Lou, so I'm going to leave my conclusion. But like I said, hopefully we can get these action reports out so you can read the full report.